Commander Vexthul stood before the massive viewing screen on the bridge of his flagship. The blue and green planet called Earth hung in space like a small marble. It looked peaceful, almost beautiful. But Vexthul did not care about beauty. He cared about strength, and Earth looked very weak. The commander's forearms moved across the control panels as he reviewed the data. His red eyes scanned the reports that his scouts had sent back. Everything he read made him more certain that this would be the easiest conquest in Coalition history. "Sir," said Lieutenant Krixva, approaching with another datapad. "The final scans are complete." Vexthul took the device and read it carefully. The humans had no energy shields protecting their cities. Their weapons shot small metal pieces instead of plasma beams. Most shocking of all, they were divided into hundreds of separate nations that often fought each other. "Look at this," Vexthul said to his officers. "They have over 200 different military forces. They cannot even agree on who leads them. How can such a divided species defend itself against us?" The other coalition officers laughed. They had seen this pattern before. Weak species always fought among themselves until the coalition arrived to bring order. Captain Mordek, a massive warrior from the Krextar species, clicked his mandibles together. "Commander, my people could conquer this world with a single battle group. Why are we sending 3 fleets? Vexthul considered this. The Krextar were right to be confident. Each of their warriors could fight 10 humans and win easily. But the Coalition followed strict protocols for all conquests. "We follow procedure," Vexthul replied. "But you are correct. This will not take long." The Coalition had conquered 47 worlds in the past century. Each time the pattern was the same. They would arrive, demonstrate their superior power, and the local species would surrender. Those who submitted became useful servants. Those who resisted were eliminated. Earth would be no different. Vexthul pulled up the psychological profiles his analysts had prepared. This was perhaps the most damning evidence of human weakness. The reports showed that humans formed strong, emotional bonds with each other. They would risk their own lives to save strangers. They even kept weak and old members of their society alive, instead of letting them die naturally. "Sir," said another officer, "the humans appear to have a fatal flaw in their military thinking." "Explain," Vexthul ordered. "They refuse to abandon wounded soldiers. In battle, they will risk entire units to save a single injured warrior. Our tactical computers cannot understand why they make such poor strategic choices." This made Vexthul even more confident. In Coalition military doctrine, the mission always came first. A good commander would sacrifice any number of soldiers to achieve victory. Sentiment was a luxury that got warriors killed. The Krextar valued only individual strength. The Velnathi, with their crystal bodies, saw war as a mathematical problem to be solved efficiently. The Zephyri, like Vexthul, believed that honor came from conquest, not from saving the weak. But humans seemed to think that protecting others was more important than winning. Such thinking would make them easy to defeat. "Begin the deployment," Vexthul commanded. "Send the first fleet to their largest population center. The second fleet will attack their military command structure. The third will secure their primitive space installations." "What message should we send them, sir?" asked Lieutenant Krixva. "The standard demand for surrender. Give them one chance to submit peacefully. When they refuse, we will demonstrate why resistance is futile." The 3 coalition fleets moved into position around Earth. Each fleet contained enough firepower to destroy entire continents. Their shields could stop any weapon the humans possessed. Their warriors were trained from birth to fight and die for the Coalition. Vexthul watched the fleets take their positions. Soon, the conquest broadcasts would begin. The humans would see Coalition ships in their skies and understand that their world belonged to stronger beings now. But something unexpected happened. Instead of the panicked communications they usually intercepted during first contact, the Coalition detected organized military chatter. The humans were not running in terror. They were preparing to fight. Colonel Jake Morrison stood in the command center beneath New York City. Around him, dozens of officers coordinated the defense of North America. The man looked tired but determined. "All units, "This is command." Morrison spoke into his radio. "The aliens have taken positions over major cities worldwide. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." In London, Captain Lisa Hayes was giving similar orders to British forces. She had studied the alien scouts for weeks and knew that conventional weapons would not be effective, but she also knew that surrender was not an option. On the Pacific Ocean, Major Chris Sullivan commanded a fleet of human warships. His vessels were tiny compared to the alien craft above them, but his crews were ready to fight regardless. The first alien broadcast reached Earth at exactly noon, Greenwich time. The message was simple and had been used on dozens of worlds before. "People of Earth, you are now subjects of the Galactic Coalition. Lay down your weapons and submit to our authority. Resistance will result in your extinction." Vex Thul expected immediate surrender. Instead, he received a response that confused him completely. "This is Admiral Susan Clark of Earth Defense Command," came the reply. "You are not welcome here. Leave our system immediately or face the consequences." The Coalition commander stared at his communication panel. No species had ever threatened the Coalition during first contact. Most begged for mercy. Others tried to negotiate. But none had ever issued ultimatums. "Sir," said Captain Mordeck, "should we begin the demonstration of force?" Vex Thul nodded. The humans clearly did not understand their situation. A few destroyed cities would make them more reasonable. But as the Coalition fleets powered their weapons, something strange happened. Instead of fleeing in panic, human military forces moved toward the alien ships. Fighter jets rose from airfields around the world. Naval vessels turned toward the skies with their weapons trained upward. The humans were actually going to fight. "This is unexpected," Vex Thul muttered. He had studied 47 previous conquests, and no species had ever responded with immediate military action. "Begin limited strikes, target their military installations only. We want them frightened, not extinct." The first battle began as Coalition energy beams struck human positions around the globe. The aliens' advanced weapons cut through human defenses like they were made of paper. Entire squadrons of human aircraft were destroyed in seconds. But the humans kept fighting. Even as their weapons proved useless against Coalition shields, they continued to attack. Even as their forces were decimated, more humans joined the battle. Vex Thul watched the tactical displays with growing confusion. By all logic, the humans should have surrendered after the first hour. Their losses were catastrophic. Their weapons were ineffective. Yet they continued to resist with a ferocity that made no tactical sense. "Commander," reported Lieutenant Krixva, "the humans are coordinating their attacks across multiple continents simultaneously. They appear to be sharing tactical information in real time." This was impossible. The Coalition's own species could barely coordinate between different fleets without telepathic links. How were these primitive humans managing such complex communication? As the first day of fighting ended, Vex Thul reviewed the battle reports. The Coalition had won every engagement decisively. Human casualties numbered in the hundreds of thousands. By every measure, this should have been a complete victory, but somehow it felt like the beginning of something much more complicated than a simple conquest. 6 months had passed since the Coalition fleets first arrived at Earth. Commander Vex Thul stared at the reports on his desk with growing frustration. Every single battle showed the same pattern. Coalition forces would attack human positions. The humans would fight back with their primitive weapons. The Coalition would win easily, but the humans never stopped fighting. "This makes no sense," Vex Thul said to his tactical officer. "We have destroyed their major cities. We have eliminated half of their military forces. Why do they continue to resist?" Lieutenant Krixva shifted nervously. "Sir, our psychologists believe the humans are not thinking rationally. They appear to be driven by emotion rather than logic." The commander's red eyes narrowed. Emotion was a weakness that the Coalition had bred out of most warrior species centuries ago. Strong feelings led to poor decisions. Smart commanders made choices based on facts, not feelings. But these humans seemed to make every decision based on emotion. In the ruins of Los Angeles, Lieutenant Colonel Amy Rodriguez crouched behind a pile of broken concrete. Her resistance cell had been fighting in the underground tunnels for 3 months. They had lost 60% of their people, but they kept recruiting new fighters from the civilian population. Rodriguez to all units. She whispered into her radio. Alien patrol moving through Sector 7. Teams 3 and 5 move to intercept. Team 2, prepare the tunnel charges. The coalition forces above ground were powerful and well-armed, but they did not understand the maze of sewers, subway tunnels, and underground parking garages that ran beneath the city. The humans used these hidden paths to appear and disappear like ghosts. Rodriguez watched through her scope as coalition warriors marched down the street. They wore advanced armor and carried energy weapons that could cut through steel. But they walked in formation, following patterns that human fighters had learned to predict. Now, she whispered. Explosions erupted from 3 different directions. Human fighters emerged from manholes and doorways, firing rockets at the alien patrol. The weapons barely damaged coalition shields, but they created confusion and noise. As the aliens turned to face the attack, more explosions came from underground. The street collapsed, trapping 2 coalition vehicles in a crater filled with burning debris. The entire ambush lasted less than 5 minutes. Then the humans vanished back into their tunnels, leaving the aliens angry and confused. This scene repeated itself hundreds of times each day across the planet. The coalition had never faced an enemy that fought like this. Most species either surrendered quickly or made grand military stands that could be defeated in large battles. But humans fought like water flowing around rocks. They bent and adapted and found new ways to cause problems. In the Australian outback, Sergeant Matt Cooper led alien forces deeper into the desert with fake radio transmissions. His team would make noise in one location, then disappear before the coalition arrived. The aliens would chase the signals for days, using fuel and supplies while finding nothing but empty land. Cooper knew the desert like his own backyard. He knew which water sources were real and which were dry. He knew how to hide in the rocks during the day and move silently at night. The aliens had better technology, but they did not understand the land they were trying to control. One night, Cooper's team surrounded a coalition camp and began making sounds like a much larger force. The aliens called for backup and waited for an attack that never came. They spent the entire night awake and alert, wasting energy on an enemy that was not really there. These humans are like insects, Captain Mordek complained to Commander Vexthul. We step on one and 10 more appear. We destroy their nests and they build new ones. How do we fight an enemy that will not stand and face us? But the strangest behavior the coalition observed was how humans treated their wounded. In a battle outside Denver, Private Kevin Shaw was shot by alien weapons and could not walk. His squad was surrounded and outnumbered. Logic said they should leave him and escape. Instead, they carried him. For 3 days, 12 humans took turns carrying their wounded friend through hostile territory. They called in airstrikes on their own position to create cover for their retreat. They shared their water and food with Shaw even though they were running low on supplies. The coalition forces followed them, expecting the humans to abandon the wounded man when the situation became hopeless. But they never did. "This is madness," said Dr. Zelknor, the coalition's chief psychologist. "No rational species would risk 12 soldiers to save one. The mathematical logic is clear. They should sacrifice the wounded individual for the good of the group." Vexthul nodded, but something about the human behavior troubled him. He had been a warrior for 40 years and had never seen soldiers show such loyalty to each other. The coalition military doctrine was simple and efficient. Strong warriors survived, weak ones died. Commanders made decisions that maximized victory and minimized losses. Sentiment was a luxury that got people killed, but these humans seemed to believe that protecting each other was more important than winning battles. Admiral Susan Clark coordinated Earth's defense from a hidden bunker deep in the Rocky Mountains. Her people brought her reports from around the world, and she studied them carefully. The coalition was winning every major engagement, but their victory was not complete. "Ma'am," said her aide, "we've lost another city." Phoenix has fallen to alien forces. Clark nodded grimly. Every loss hurt, but she was beginning to see patterns in how the aliens fought. They were powerful and efficient, but they were also predictable. They followed the same tactics on every world they conquered. Have you noticed something interesting? She asked her staff. The aliens fight like they're reading from a textbook. Same formations, same strategies, same responses to our attacks. Her intelligence officer looked up from his computer. You're right, ma'am. They seem to have one way of fighting and they use it everywhere. Clark smiled for the first time in months. An enemy that never changed tactics was an enemy that could be defeated, even by weaker forces. Send a message to all resistance cells, she ordered. Tell them we're going to try something the aliens have never seen before. Meanwhile, on the Coalition flagship, Vexthul received a communication from the High Command. The message was brief and not encouraging. Commander, the High Council has reviewed your progress on Earth. 6 months for a single planet is unacceptable. You have 1 month to complete the conquest or face replacement. Vexthul stared at the message. In 47 previous conquests, the longest had taken 3 weeks. Most species surrendered within days of first contact. But Earth was different. The humans were stubborn in ways that defied military logic. They refused to accept defeat even when defeat was obvious. For the first time in his long career, Commander Vexthul began to wonder if the Coalition had finally met an enemy they could not break. 2 years had passed since the invasion began. Commander Vexthul looked older than his years as he studied the battle reports. The Coalition controlled most of Earth's major cities, but the humans had not surrendered. Instead, their resistance had grown stronger. The commander's officers no longer laughed when discussing human tactics. Too many Coalition warriors had died in ambushes and traps. Too many supply convoys had been destroyed by fighters who appeared from nowhere and vanished like smoke. Sir, said Lieutenant Krixva, we have received another request for reinforcements from the ground forces. They say the humans are using new tactics that our training manuals do not cover. Vexthul sighed. He had already requested additional fleets from the High Command 3 times. Each time he was told that Earth was not a priority. The Coalition had other worlds to conquer, and they expected him to finish this one quickly, but the humans would not be finished. In a secret laboratory hidden beneath the ruins of Chicago, Dr. Elena Foster worked with pieces of alien technology that human forces had recovered from destroyed Coalition vehicles. She had been studying alien biology for 18 months, and her discoveries were starting to change everything. Look at this, she said to her assistant, pointing at tissue samples under a microscope. The Krekstar have incredible individual strength, but their brain structure shows no development in the areas we associate with group cooperation. She moved to another sample. The Velnathi are even more extreme. Their crystalline nervous system is designed for logical calculation, but they appear to be incapable of emotional bonds. Dr. Foster had examined tissue samples from 7 different Coalition species. All of them showed the same pattern. They were individually powerful, but they lacked something that humans took for granted. They can't do what we do, she whispered to herself. They can't sacrifice for strangers. Her research showed that Coalition military doctrine had never encountered an enemy willing to accept massive losses for long-term strategic advantage. Every other species they had conquered followed predictable patterns. When losses became too high, they surrendered. But humans were different. They would take terrible casualties if it meant protecting others or achieving important goals. Dr. Foster picked up her secure phone and called Admiral Clark's bunker. Ma'am, I think I know how to beat them. 3 days later, Captain Ryan Murphy sat in a meeting with Earth's remaining military leaders. The plan Dr. Foster had proposed sounded completely insane. Let me understand this correctly, said General Peter Hayes. You want every human military unit on the planet to coordinate a single massive operation? Captain Murphy nodded. The aliens have never faced an enemy that could organize this kind of sacrifice. Their own psychology makes it impossible for them to understand what we're planning. Admiral Clark studied the tactical displays. The plan would require perfect coordination between millions of people across 6 continents. It would also cost more human lives than any military operation in history. The casualties will be enormous, she said quietly. Yes, ma'am, Murphy replied. But if we don't try this, we'll lose everything anyway. At least this way, we have a chance. General Hayes looked at the faces around the table. These were the last senior commanders Earth had left. They were tired, outnumbered, and running out of options. If we do this, he said slowly, there's no going back. Once we start, we're committed to the end. The aliens think we're beaten, said Dr. Foster. They think we're just making desperate gestures before we surrender. They can't imagine that we're setting up something this complex. Admiral Clark made the decision that would change everything. Operation Last Stand is approved. Send the orders to every unit, every resistance cell, and every civilian coordinator. Tell them this is humanity's final move. The operation began exactly as the aliens expected. Human forces around the world launched what appeared to be desperate attacks on coalition positions. The assaults were poorly coordinated and seemed to waste resources on meaningless targets. Commander Vexthul watched the tactical displays with satisfaction. Finally, the humans were acting rationally. These attacks were clearly the last efforts of a defeated species. Soon, they would exhaust themselves and be forced to surrender. Sir, reported Captain Mordeck, human forces are attacking our supply depot in Brazil. They're taking heavy casualties for a target with little strategic value. Similar reports came in from around the world. Humans were throwing themselves at coalition positions with suicidal intensity, gaining nothing and losing everything. They have finally broken, Vexthul said to his officers. These are the death throes of their military. Once they exhaust their remaining forces, we can accept their surrender. But Dr. Foster and Captain Murphy were watching different displays in their hidden command center. Every human attack was carefully planned to force coalition fleets into specific positions. Every death served a purpose in a strategy so complex that it required the coordination of billions of people. In Australia, Sergeant Cooper led his team in an attack on an alien communications post. The mission was suicide, and everyone knew it, but their sacrifice would force the coalition to move reinforcements from another location. In the Atlantic Ocean, Commander Brooks led a fleet of civilian ships against a coalition battle group. Her vessels were converted fishing boats and cargo ships with welded-on weapons. They had no chance of victory, but their attack would draw alien forces away from more important targets. Around the world, millions of humans made the same choice. They attacked impossible targets, defended worthless positions, and died for objectives that seemed to make no sense. But every action was part of a larger pattern that the coalition could not see. The humans are behaving strangely, Dr. Zelknor reported to Commander Vexthul. Their attacks show no concern for casualties or tactical advantage. It is as if they want to die. Vexthul nodded. He had seen this behavior before on other worlds. Some species would make grand gestures of defiance before accepting defeat. It was emotional and irrational, but it was also harmless. Let them waste their lives, he said. When they have no soldiers left, they will have no choice but to surrender. But something was troubling the coalition forces. Their warriors were beginning to hesitate before attacking human positions. Even though they won every battle, each victory felt hollow. The humans never begged for mercy, they never tried to negotiate. They simply fought until they died, often taking coalition warriors with them in ways that defied military logic. Commander, said Lieutenant Krixva, some of our troops are reporting unusual stress symptoms. They say fighting humans is different from fighting other species. Vexthul frowned. Coalition warriors were trained from birth to handle combat stress. What made fighting humans so different? The answer came during a battle in the ruins of Detroit. A single human soldier, wounded and surrounded, continued to transmit intelligence about coalition positions, even as she was dying. Her final message was not a plea for help, but a warning to other human forces about an alien ambush. Coalition warriors who witnessed this began to understand something that their commanders did not. They were not fighting an army that wanted to win. They were fighting people who would rather die than let others suffer. For species bred for individual combat and logical thinking, This was more terrifying than any weapon. As Operation Last Stand entered its final phase, the psychological pressure on coalition forces reached a breaking point. They were winning every battle, but they were starting to lose something more important. They were losing their certainty that victory was possible against an enemy that viewed death as just another tactical option. Operation Last Stand reached its most critical moment when Captain Laura Bennett received her final orders. She stood on the bridge of the human starship Defiance, looking at the massive coalition fleet that surrounded Earth like a metal wall. Her ship was old and damaged. Her crew numbered only 43 people. Against them waited 200 alien warships with weapons that could destroy planets. "Captain," said her communications officer, "Admiral Clark is on the radio." Bennett took the handset. "This is Bennett. Laura, you know what we're asking of you." Clark's voice was tired but steady. "Your mission will give the evacuation ships time to escape, but there's no way back for your crew." Bennett looked around her bridge. Every person there was young, enough to be her child. They all knew they were going to die, but none of them had asked to transfer to a safer assignment. "We understand, ma'am," Bennett replied. "We'll buy you as much time as we can." The Defiance was not alone. 12 other human ships moved alongside her toward the coalition fleet. They were cargo vessels, research ships, and patrol boats that had been fitted with whatever weapons Earth could spare. Commander Vexthal watched the approaching human ships with confusion. This attack made no military sense. The humans had to know they could not win against his entire fleet. "Sir," said Lieutenant Krixva, "should I order the fleet to target the human ships?" Vexthal hesitated. Something about this attack felt different from the others. The human ships were moving in perfect formation, as if they were performing a ceremony rather than fighting a battle. "Wait," he ordered. "Let me see what they're planning." Major Tony Garcia piloted his fighter from the Defiance's small hangar. His ship was barely holding together, but his mission was simple. He had to destroy the coalition flagship's shield generator, even if it killed him. "This is Garcia to all fighters," he said over the radio. "Remember, we're not trying to survive. We're trying to make it count." 6 fighters launched from the human ships. Each pilot knew exactly what they had to do. Each one accepted that they would not see another day. Garcia's fighter shook as coalition weapons fired at him. His shields failed immediately, and his left engine caught fire, but he kept flying toward his target. "See you on the other side," he said into his radio, then crashed his burning fighter directly into the coalition flagship's shield generator. The explosion was small compared to the massive alien ship, but it created a gap in their defenses. That gap lasted only seconds, but it was enough for Commander Ashley Brooks to ram her destroyer into the flagship's hull. Brooks had commanded ships for 20 years. She could have ejected from her vessel before impact. Instead, she stayed at her post and made sure her ship hit the exact spot where it would cause the most damage. The coalition flagship shook from the impact. For the first time in the war, a human attack had actually damaged their most powerful vessel, but the cost was terrible. Brooks and her entire crew died in the collision. Garcia and 5 other pilots were gone. The Defiance and 3 other ships were destroyed by alien weapons. The surface of Earth, similar sacrifices were happening everywhere. Corporal Danny Parker held a hill outside the ruins of Miami with 23 other soldiers. The position had no strategic value, but it was part of the larger plan. Coalition forces attacked the hill with overwhelming numbers. Parker's squad had 2 machine guns and some rocket launchers. The aliens had energy weapons and armored vehicles. "Parker to base," he said into his radio as alien beams cut down 2 of his men. "We're taking heavy fire, but we're not moving." "Understood, Corporal," came the reply. "Hold as long as you can." Parker knew that "as long as you can" meant until they were all dead. His position was supposed to keep coalition forces busy while human civilians evacuated from nearby towns. For 3 days, Parker's squad fought against impossible odds. They were hungry, tired, and running out of ammunition. One by one, his soldiers fell to alien weapons. On the 2nd day, Private Lisa Wong was hit by enemy fire. She was bleeding badly, and needed medical attention immediately. Logic said Parker should send her to the rear for treatment. Instead, Wong refused to leave. She kept firing her weapon from behind cover even as her strength faded. She died at her post, still trying to protect the other soldiers. By the third day, only Parker and 3 others remained alive. They were surrounded, outnumbered, and had no hope of rescue. The smart thing would have been to surrender. But Parker had his orders. His job was to hold the hill, and he would hold it until he died. "This is Parker," he said into his radio as alien warriors closed in around his position. "We're down to our last clips. It's been an honor serving with you all." The coalition forces took the hill 30 minutes later. They found 4 human bodies and no survivors. But those 4 people had held off 1,000 alien warriors for 3 days. Commander Vexthul received reports of battles like this from around the world. Each report was the same. Humans would defend useless positions with suicidal determination. They would die rather than retreat. They would sacrifice everything for objectives that made no strategic sense. "This is madness," Captain Mordek said to Vexthul. "These humans fight like they want to die." But something strange was happening to coalition forces. Their warriors were becoming reluctant to attack human positions. They knew they would win, but they also knew the cost would be high. The psychological turning point came during a battle in Chicago. Sergeant Maria Santos was the last survivor of her unit. She was bleeding from multiple wounds and could barely hold her weapon. Coalition warriors surrounded her position, expecting her to surrender. Instead, she continued to transmit intelligence about alien movements to other human forces. "This is Santos," she said weakly into her radio. "Large alien force moving through Sector 12. They have heavy weapons. Recommend you avoid the area." She died while still talking, trying to save people she had never met. The coalition soldiers who witnessed this began to feel something they had never experienced before. It was not fear of death, which they understood. It was fear of fighting people who cared more about others than about themselves. Dr. Zelknor studied the psychological reports with growing alarm. "Commander, our warriors are showing signs of severe stress. They say fighting humans is unlike anything they have experienced." Vexthul nodded grimly. He was beginning to understand why this conquest was taking so long. The coalition had weapons that could destroy worlds, but they had never fought an enemy that made every death meaningful. "Sir," said Lieutenant Krixva, "we have reports that some of our troops are hesitating before attacking human positions." This was unprecedented. Coalition warriors had conquered 47 worlds without showing fear. But something about humans was different. They were not just fighting to win, they were fighting to prove that some things were worth dying for. And that idea was more terrifying to the coalition than any weapon humans possessed. The war ended not with a great battle, but with words that changed everything. Colonel Ben Taylor sat in chains aboard the coalition flagship, surrounded by the most powerful military leaders in the galaxy. He was the last high-ranking human officer, still alive, captured when alien forces finally broke through Earth's final command bunker. The Supreme War Council had gathered to witness humanity's surrender. 12 different alien species filled the massive chamber, each one representing thousands of conquered worlds. They expected to see a broken man begging for mercy. Instead, Colonel Taylor looked calm. Commander Vexthul stepped forward. "Human, your species has fought bravely, but your resistance is over. Earth belongs to the coalition now. Do you have any final words before we accept your surrender?" Taylor looked around the chamber at the assembled alien commanders. Then he smiled. "I'm not here to surrender," he said quietly. "I'm here to offer you something you've never had before." The aliens exchanged confused glances. No conquered species had ever offered anything to their conquerors. Most begged for mercy. Others tried to negotiate for better treatment, but none had ever spoken as if they were equals. "What could your defeated species possibly offer us?" asked General Tekmar of the Velnathi, his crystal body glowing with contempt. "Victory," Taylor replied simply. The chamber erupted in angry clicking, roaring, and electronic sounds as the alien commanders expressed their disbelief. Victory? The humans had been crushed. Their cities were in ruins. Their military was destroyed. But, Taylor continued speaking, his voice carrying clearly through the noise. For 3 years you've tried to break us. You've won every battle, destroyed our fleets, and conquered our cities. But you still don't understand what you're really fighting. Commander. Vexthul raised a hand for silence. Despite himself, he was curious about what the human would say. You think this war was about Earth, Taylor said. You think we were fighting to protect our planet, but that was never the real battle. Taylor stood up as much as his chains would allow. We were fighting to prove something to you. We were fighting to show you what you could become. Dr. Zelknor leaned forward. As the Coalition's chief psychologist, he had studied human behavior for 3 years without understanding it. Explain. Your species are individually powerful, Taylor said, looking at each alien commander in turn. You're stronger than us, smarter than us, more advanced than us. But you're missing something that makes all that power meaningless. And what is that? Asked Captain Mordek, his mandibles clicking with irritation. You don't know how to fight for each other, Taylor replied. You fight for victory, for conquest, for yourselves. But you've never learned to fight for something greater than your own survival. The chamber fell silent. This was not what any of them had expected to hear from a defeated enemy. Every species you've conquered before us fought the same way you do, Taylor continued. They fought to win, and when winning became impossible, they surrendered. That's logical. That's smart. That's what you expected us to do. He paused, looking directly at Commander Vexthul. But we didn't fight to win. We fought to change you. General Thekmar's crystal body flashed with angry light. Change us? You are defeated. Your world is ours. How have you changed anything? Taylor smiled again. Look around this room. Look at your own commanders. 3 years ago, they were certain of victory. They knew exactly how this war would end. But now? The alien leaders glanced at each other uncomfortably. It was true that the conquest of Earth had not gone as planned. Their warriors were exhausted and demoralized. Their perfect record of quick victories had been broken. Now your soldiers hesitate before attacking our positions, Taylor said. Now they have nightmares about humans who died protecting strangers. Now they wonder what it means to fight for something other than themselves. Commander Vexthul felt a chill run through his body. The human was right. His own troops had been reporting strange dreams and unusual stress symptoms. They were winning the war, but it was costing them something they had never lost before. Their certainty. This is psychological warfare, declared Admiral Korvex of the Zephyri. You are trying to weaken us with words. No, Taylor said firmly. I'm trying to make you stronger. He looked directly at the Coalition Supreme Commander, a massive creature called Overlord Nexus, whose species had founded the Coalition centuries ago. You rule 47 worlds through fear and superior firepower. But fear only works until someone stops being afraid. Superior firepower only matters until you meet someone willing to die to protect others. Taylor's chains rattled as he gestured toward the viewing screen that showed Earth below. We've shown you what that looks like. We've shown you what happens when people fight not for themselves, but for each other. And now, you can't unsee it. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the electronic humming of the ship's system seemed muted. I offer you a choice, Taylor said. You can rule through fear for another 1,000 years, always wondering when the next species will refuse to break. Or you can learn what we tried to teach you. And what is that? Asked Overlord Nexus, his voice like grinding stone. That true strength doesn't come from standing above others. It comes from standing beside them. Taylor reached into his pocket slowly, careful not to make any threatening moves. He pulled out a small communication device. This transmitter will send a signal to every remaining human resistance cell on Earth. When I press this button, they will all receive the same order. The alien commanders tensed, expecting some final desperate attack. They will stop fighting, Taylor said quietly. They will come out of hiding and offer medical aid to wounded Coalition soldiers. They will share their food and water with your troops. They will prove that even in defeat, humans choose to protect rather than destroy. The absurdity of it struck the alien leaders like a physical blow. No conquered species had ever offered to help their conquerors. It violated every natural law of warfare and survival. "Why?" whispered Dr. Zelknor. "Why would you help us after everything we have done to your people?" Taylor looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Because that's what you do for family," he said simply. "And whether you realize it or not, we're all family now." He pressed the button. Across Earth, the signal reached thousands of hidden humans. In sewers beneath New York, in caves in the mountains, in bunkers under the desert, the same message appeared on screens and radios everywhere. Stand down. Offer aid. Show them who we are. Within hours, coalition commanders were receiving impossible reports. Human fighters were emerging from hiding places and walking up to alien patrols with medical supplies. Resistance leaders were radioing coalition forces to warn them about dangerous areas. Civilians were bringing food and water to enemy soldiers. Admiral Karen Wells emerged from the deepest bunker in the Rocky Mountains, her hands raised but carrying medical equipment. She walked directly to the nearest coalition checkpoint and began treating wounded alien soldiers. "I'm Admiral Wells," she told the shocked commanders. "I surrender myself and my remaining forces, but first, let us help your wounded." On the coalition flagship, Overlord Nexus stared at the tactical displays in complete confusion. His computers could not process what they were seeing. The humans had found a way to surrender that looked like victory. Commander Vex Thul turned to Colonel Taylor. "This changes nothing. We still control your world." "Yes," Taylor agreed. "But the question is, what will you do with that control?" He gestured toward the reports flooding in from the surface. "You can rule over people who hate you, or you can lead people who choose to follow you. You can be conquerors, or you can be something the galaxy has never seen before." "And what is that?" asked Vex Thul. Taylor smiled one last time. "Partners." 6 months later, the first joint human coalition fleet prepared to defend a distant world against a new threat to the galaxy. Commander Vex Thul stood beside Colonel Taylor on the bridge of their ship, watching human and alien crews work together. "So, still do not understand your species," Vex Thul said. "You don't have to understand us," Taylor replied. "You just have to trust us." The Zephyrian commander looked at his human partner. "And if we do?" Taylor pointed to the mixed crew around them, humans and aliens working side by side with a coordination the coalition had never achieved. "Then you'll discover what happens when unstoppable force learns to become immovable determination." The ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying with it the seeds of a new kind of empire. One built not on conquest, but on the revolutionary idea that the strong become stronger when they choose to protect the weak. And across the galaxy, other species began to hear whispers of the impossible warriors from Earth. The ones who had won by teaching their enemies how to become better than they ever thought possible.